What's up, guys? I'm back. A little less hair and the same guy still staring at me in the wheelchair. And on today's episode, we got a new project. 69, ready to be turned into a class 11 roller. Starting out, shelf full of parts, bunch of impy stuff, man welder adjuster, the rest of the goodies. As we keep on going, I'll go over some of the parts with you, what we use while we use it. But on this first episode, I'm just gonna kind of go over what we start doing, how we get going, a little bit of fabrication. Body itself isn't too bad. A little bit of rust isn't the worst thing. All it does is make the car lighter. Now, like I said, pretty sure this thing's a 69. It's actually getting built for Bruce Fraley for another customer. I think he intends first race he's going to go to Crandon, and then we'll see where he goes from there. All right, guys, so as you can see, Bruce did us a pretty big solid here. He had the whole body sandblasted and then primered. You can see a little bit of damage. It's a little too excessive. We're gonna have to do something with, but you go to the pan, same deal. He ripped off all the tar paper, sandblasted it all, and then primered it all, getting ready to work on. So first order of business here, get this thing rolled into the shop so we can get the arms, the beam off, start a little fabrication. All right, we got this thing up in the air, ready to work on. Start out by pulling the rear arms off. 17mm Allen is your pivot bolt. Obviously spring plates, torsion bars. Bruce had already cut out all the parking brake stuff. We'll end up covering that hole up right there. When we come to the front end, you just got your 4 beam bolts holding it in. We'll end up dropping the beam so we could build that. I'm gonna put some of this in fast forward, still trying to explain it all to you guys, but so you're not stuck watching hours of video, so we'll get that on camera. Quick little rundown. When you're tearing one of these apart, it's very important to know that we use a lot of the German hardware. Pivot bolts, spring plate bolts, not the actual spring plate, but the spring plate cap, which are these guys right here. Same deal. Body bolts, these are the bolts that go underneath the body in the front end. And also when it comes down to spring plates, spring plate caps, which in class 11 you want to run the duals, don't run the singles. You run German arms, German backing plates, German drums, German beam, arms, spindles, everything out. Nothing that is made today with those parts is as strong as the German stuff is, so if you can use it, run it. Now that we got this thing torn down, first order of business is we're gonna end up putting the adjuster in. Let me go grab that thing. Obviously we're a little wide right now. What I like to do is first come in, there's spot welds here we're gonna need to get rid of, pop this cover off, and then I end up cutting right here on this seam, plasmine out the stock transmission route, completely get rid of that thing, and then once we get our measurement width to width here, we're gonna end up cutting the adjuster to that width as well, and then putting it in. So I'm gonna put you guys on fast forward a little bit again, get to that point, and then I'll show you how to do it. That didn't take long to make a mess. All right, so plates off. You can see where there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spot welds per side. Took the plasma, cut around here. I really try to cut that much room because once you get the adjuster and fingers in here, you're gonna want the room to be able to access that. And then biggest thing here is when you cut through here, you wanna make sure you don't get into the clutch tube right there. You'll end up messing that up. Now, what we're gonna end up doing is I'm gonna measuring my width of where I wanna cut this torsion housing, obviously even amount from each side in. I'll get that cut, I'll get my adjuster cut, and start chipping away a little bit at this material down in here so it goes around this base of the adjuster. All right, center cut out. I gotta clean up those edges a little bit. And as you can see, there's this plate underneath here. You know, I cut into a little bit on each side, tapped it down a little bit. So the outer diameter of this matches the inner diameter of the adjuster. So what I'll do after I get my width, to get it straight in the car, you just gotta make sure this inner diameter matches, or outer diameter here matches inner diameter perfectly on this guy. And that'll make sure it's straight across the car. So yeah, that'll be the next thing. Let me get this adjuster cut down. We'll get it tacked in, and then that's when we'll have to flip this pan to notch around the bottom to box in around the adjuster. All right, got the adjuster cut down. Got a nice fit in there. So I'm gonna tack weld it from the top before I do anything on the bottom. But what you have to make sure of is the angle of this plate, you know, the bottom face of it. I keep it in line with the pan. The reason why is if you angle it down, your adjuster screws will be hanging down below the car. You hit a rock or something, you'll end up damaging those. So it's important that you try to keep this bottom plane right here of the adjuster, you know, flat with the car, because then on the other side, when you plate it, you'll see it recesses the bolts up, so you don't end up jacking those up. And then obviously you can see why I torch around this, because once I tack it, I'll be able to bend that up, move it over, and be able to completely weld around this whole adjuster. All right, halfway welded in. Welded, spot welded the clutch tube and throttle tube back in right there. And then I forgot to mention in the previous, I always put the trans mount bolted on before I start welding there, just in case there's any type of movement, or if it wants to start, at least try to hold it in place. So now we'll flip this thing over and start on the bottom side. All right, got it flipped over. See, now what I'll end up doing is right here where the adjuster U is right here. I'm gonna be coming up, over, back, pretty much making a square here, and then boxing it in, finish welding, grind this down, finish welding around, and clean it all up and finish it. All right, there we go. What I do also when we're building cars, see this big old folder we got? Those are all templates from cars we've built. We try to use the same ones to make everything as matched as possible. So here's the template for the side. So that's the first thing I cut, tack welded those in. Then I got a template that I can make for that. I do it mostly off measurements most of the time, but yeah. And then, yeah, there it is, 100% welded in. And the last thing to do to the bottom of the pan before we could flip it back over is the spring plate stop gussets. So what we're gonna end up doing is cutting some of this material away. And then there's plates we weld on the top here. And then we'll end up putting a 1-inch gusset from here to there. All right, so you'll see in the last little snippet, I cut in here, and then I make sure this cut is flush. And then these plates, my dad sells them, 11 Brothers Motorsports. He'll sell the rear arm gussets, he sells the front hook stop kits, a few other things. You can reach out to him if you want them. I had to modify these ones a little bit. What you gotta watch out for is VW has like 2 or 3 different torsion housing bottoms right here, and you may have to modify a little bit, so don't be surprised if you got to do that. And then get this thing on the plier. Fail. Number 2. Let's see. So what I make sure of is it's flush in the front right there, and then flush back here. And then what's gonna end up happening later on is where the arm comes down, we're gonna weld the block off of this, and that's gonna be our down stop. So I gotta massage this when I hear more, but that's what's happening here. So I'll do a little fast forward and show you the end result after the 1-inch gussets are in there as well. All right, side gussets welded on, in line, right? So the arm can come down and hit this block we're gonna weld on here when we set up the rear suspension. Same deal. So then lastly, we're gonna put that 1-inch tube from there to the torsion housing. All right, that's a wrap on the rear torsion housing. So you can see we got our 1-inch gussets there. It's obviously a flat cut into the plate, notched into the torsion housing. Adjuster check, other one check. That should wrap it up for the first video. Next one, we should be mounting the transmission, getting into the rear arms. Following that, we'll get to the beam. Shout out Bomber Eyewear for the eye protection, and we'll see you at the next one.